and welcome back to Old School. Today we're going to be all over the place in the emotional, mental, spiritual, and physical quadrants. Our teachers are going to be Andi Ashworth and Charlie Peacock, authors of Why Everything That Doesn't Matter Matters So Much. Andi Ashworth is the author of Real Love for Real Life, The Art and Work of Caring. She is co-founder of the Art House in Nashville, where she served for over 2 decades through hospitality and mentoring, hosting a wide range of guests and organizations. Andi holds an MA in Theological Studies from Covenant Seminary in St. Louis. Charlie Peacock is a Grammy Award-winning, Billboard chart-topping music producer, composer, and recording artist. He is co-founder of the Art House, Wedgwood Circle, and founder and director emeritus of the commercial music program at Lipscomb University. He and Andi have been married for 50 years, and they have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. And they are here today to talk about their book, but also to go into their fascinating story. And so we want to welcome to class Andi and Charlie.
Yeah, so we are both from Northern California, and I heard you mention just a moment ago that you've been through Yuba City, California before, and so that's where we were born. Well, you were born in Marysville, right? Yeah, but that's the area that we come from, and since you've been through there, you know it is farm country. And lots of trees, fruit, and nuts, and rice, and that's where we grew up. We're just small town kids who had big dreams, and though we love our place and the people that, of course, our families that we grew up within. For us, Yuba City was a place you leave. You know, we saw that we wanted to be out into this big world that we read about in books and we heard about from the artists that we listened to, you know, when we were teenagers, and so we left Yuba City for the big city of Sacramento, which you know is the state capital of California.
Been there many times as well.
And so that was us moving to the big city. And we got married at 18 and started a life together. And the first 7 years of our life were just really, really difficult because we were still growing up. I mean, we were really just kids and had a lot of growing to do and went through so many different kinds of changes, but we also had children very young too. So the challenges of, they were overwhelming. I mean, the challenges that we faced as being, you know, married as teenagers and having children young, me trying to be a working musician, dealing with substance abuse problems. Yeah, it was very, very difficult. Yeah, 7 years of that. And then we had a cosmic intervention in that Jesus came for us. And he sent
he does.
He sent a saxophonist that I respected, which was perfect, you know, because I was a big John Coltrane fan, and so he sent me a jazz saxophonist. And I believed. I heard the story, and I believed, and I told the story to Andi, and she said, "Oh, I don't know about that." And but she went out, and you know, she was like, "Let me find out on my own." And we were pretty. I mean, Andi was pretty immersed in the feminism and women's studies culture of the mid 1970s, and I certainly had embraced it as well. And so for her, one of the the things that she needed to explore was that if we were going to talk about the Bible, is the Bible sexist, which was a huge question. And then, what does Jesus think about women and the role of women in family life, in culture, society, all of that. So she went out and did some of her own investigating, as it were, and then really, even after doing that, I mean, I think you were impressed that there were intellectuals that professed to be Christians who were talking about this.
I was.
But at the same time, it was really reading the Bible, right?
Yeah, it was. Well, along with the question, is the Bible sexist? Even before that, I wondered, why should I believe what this book says? Why should I care? What gives it any authority over any other book?
Had you had, I apologize, I'll let you finish that, but had you had no exposure in little Yuba City or Yuba about to God or church or anything like that?
We both did.
We had some,
We had grandparents, and
it's primarily
and
through our grandparents.
yeah, but yeah, we did have.
I was just curious if you had any, because a lot of times, I mean, at our age, I think we're close in age, that exposure was there because like businesses were closed on Sunday. You know what I mean? There was at least peripheral exposure to Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, in this whole time of me just kind of saying, well, if he was trying to talk to me about that he had this new faith, and I was saying, well, what are you talking about? That just makes me, I don't know what that
crazy.
is. Yeah. But I did find my questions. I guess that's what we're getting at. I found my questions and kind of followed the trail of those questions and eventually began to read one of the Gospels and just came to a point where I couldn't turn back from knowing what seemed to me to be the beginning of truth. And so I just I bowed my life to that and kept moving on and
took a month. That was like a month.
Yeah, between the two of
Wow,
us.
I mean,
between the two of us.
That's not really that long in the scheme of, having that kind of a life-changing situation. But I've always believed the Gospels were the place to start. In fact, whenever like if I talk to somebody and they do choose to give their life to Christ or want to understand where to start, I always tell them start with John.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did. That's where I was. Yeah.
Because he does. If you want to know how he treats women, the Gospels are. I mean, you see how God does throughout the Bible, but what Jesus thinks of them and what their purpose and their ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, of course, by then, even just with everything that my husband has said so far about the early part of marriage, we were deeply, deeply in need of somebody outside of us to come inside of us and help us to forgive each other so that we could keep moving forward. We had experienced a lot of life change through the programs of Alcoholics Anonymous and Al-Anon, but we still needed a source outside of ourselves to, make it happen inside of us that we could move towards forgiveness and, continue to move into just a new way of being together and being life and having a family and then continuing to follow God into all the rest of our callings. But that was something that was pretty immediate. We really needed emergency help. And we didn't have the power within us to really,
Now we had to go to the ER. That's basically it.
But so of course, as we all know, that wasn't instant, but it was something that
not at all.
No.
But it was enough. It was enough grace. I would say that's that's been the way that we would probably describe our entire life. You know, the last 4 decades since then, it's just always enough grace to get through the next passage and to discover more and understand more, and then more grace for the next part of the journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and just like you said, in any situation, he wants us to walk through it because that's the character building part of it. It's just releasing that to him, and the forgiveness we've received is the only way we can dole out that forgiveness, number one. And then number two, it's always just a start. To me, it's always just a start. There's not going to be an immediate, I mean, yes, our salvation was a transaction on the cross, but it was a process throughout the time that it came to fruition. So that's how I feel about every single thing, is that just that hope and that acknowledgement that that grace is there and that it's coming and that it's being poured out on you is what helps us get through the rest of it, you know, survive the ER.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So then when does leaving Sacramento take place, and the next steps for you guys?
Well, we built a life in Sacramento. Once we are, you know, we enter into the stage of sobriety and concentration on one another and family, and then we enter into the next phase, which is following Jesus through that. And you know, anybody who's ever lived around a substance abuse person knows that even if you don't do anything else but remove the substance, there's going to be some big changes. And so I really found my inner entrepreneur. I think prior to that, I just wasn't even really sure if I wanted to keep living, honestly. But after that, then in Christ, I really found the will to live again, and not just for myself, but for people and places and things greater than myself. And so that part of me, talents and gifts that I had that had been lying dormant, sort of kind of buried under this my own personal problems, really came to the forefront. And within a year, our life was demonstrably different, even financially. You know, I was learning how to actually care for the family, as was Andi, who had always been very on it with the little kids and everything. But I think we were both now starting to really negotiate like roles and how we would do things together, things that we would do apart. And we just started to figure, honestly, you know, sort of 8 years later, trying to figure out like, oh, so we're married. Oh, and this is what it means to be married. Oh, okay. Well, this is going to be great.
You're not just my roommate.
Yeah, you're not just, you know, my girlfriend with a ring on her finger. And so, yeah, we grew up. I mean, essentially, it was part of, we started those first steps of maybe adulthood at that point. And then we had about 10 years in Sacramento that really we benefited from so much church fellowship and friendships that we made there that we're still friends with today. And then, like Yuba City had before that, Sacramento just had a ceiling, you know. And for me, music-wise, I had already kind of exhausted everything in San Francisco, done everything I could in Los Angeles except move there, which I had spent so much time in Los Angeles. I knew moving to LA was not an option. I did not want to live there, and I certainly didn't want to raise our family there. And I knew that Andi did not want to move there. So it was like, okay, And then I ended up getting this gig producing a record for an artist that lived in Nashville, which involved me coming to Nashville for a week to record vocals. And you tell the story better than I do. I like the way you tell the story. So then I came to Nashville. I was there, and then I called Andi.
Yeah. So he called me, and I was with our children who were young, elementary school at the time, and we were having dinner with three of my very best friends from my whole life. Still, some of my best friends that we grew up together. He called, I answered the phone, and he began to use, so he's in Nashville, I'm in Sacramento. He began to use words like magical and fairy tale. And this is the best place to raise a family. And, just he wanted to move. He wanted to move. And I had listened to him previously to that trip and just thought, this will probably pass. I'm just going to not pay attention. But it was a real thing. And that led to, it was not too many months later that we had sold the first house we'd ever owned. I think it was, and not at all. It was like couple months. And we were driving to Nashville to take up residence. And as it turns out, in the whole scheme of our life, you can look back and I can see our life would not have had anything in it that has been our life work had we not moved at that time. Because there was so much of our life work that unfolded for us in Nashville over the next decades. Mm-hmm. But it was that thing where, there was that everything was just kind of seemed to be closing up in Sacramento and possibly opening in Nashville. And yet it was all the heartbreak of when you have to leave people and you have to leave family and you take kids away from their grandparents and all of that. But you're just making those decisions in the moment, following as best you can. And then much later, you can understand that that was very necessary. But
I joke with friends that in the morning I have a prayer time in my living room and I talk out loud. I'm sure my daughter, I have an only daughter who lives with me, and she probably thinks I'm crazy. But anyway, he and I have dispensed with subtlety. I'm 61. I don't know how much time I have left. I'm sure it could be a fair amount, but it's whatever he has in mind.
Exactly.
So it's like, let's dispense with subtlety. So I ask him to throw open the doors where I'm supposed to go and put flaming seraphim in front of the ones where I'm not. Let's just be really clear because I clearly had discernment problems all the way through the end of my marriage. So now to have some clarity, let's just dispense with any, and not even a parable. I need you to just say it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And we needed that too. I mean, at that time. And so things like, we put our house up for sale. We had an offer within a week, and then someone else came forward and they offered above the asking price. It was that kind of thing.
Sure.
And before we were in Nashville. I mean, it just happened.
That's awesome. That's exactly how he does it. I think it's when we want to stop listening or we want to put our fingers in there and go, okay, maybe I'll go to Nashville, but I'm going to go through LA first, or I'm going to go do this or that. And we try and get in there and finagle it, which is why I honestly believe he isn't giving me many more than a couple steps in front of me because I'm trying to date. Let's put it that way. And if he told me the man he had for me was going to be at a Starbucks, I would probably be going to all the Starbucks in my area trying to make that happen, looking at every guy, So we have to let his course of things and those door openings and those divine appointments happen for us, I think. And I love hearing when people are obedient to that, especially with your struggles early on.
Yeah.
Being obedient to what he has to say and listening for him didn't come, well, it doesn't for a lot of us. We were born with a sin nature, come naturally, but you hadn't been necessarily exampled that. So here you both were finding your way, and you just end up listening to him regardless. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. We were, it was a blessing to have unity in it. I mean, it wasn't that we weren't scared. We definitely, were scared, but we also had a lot of support. There wasn't anybody in our life that was going like, oh, I don't know about this. This seems crazy, In fact, my parents were very supportive of it, and they would be losing their grandkids,
Right.
So, which we now know as grandparents, wow, that's a big thing. I mean, when you give your blessing to your children to move halfway across the country and you're going to not see your grandkids, that's a big blessing they're giving you.
I think my daughter is scared because she's an only child that I would move wherever.
Yeah.
So she would love it if I would just say, yeah.
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 Well, we all live together. All our kids live here in Nashville too.
Oh, awesome.
Not together in the same
Yeah,
place,
not together
but
in the same
in the same city.
Yeah, in the same
except for
city.
one who's off to college in
Yeah,
Chicago.
we have one grandchild.
Oh.
in
My
Chicago.
daughter goes to college here, and so she's living with me, but she's just, because she's an only child, learned from a young age, and she came to know the Lord very young. And it concerned me because I was like, not because I didn't think it was genuine, but sometimes when kids are little, it happens because they feel like that's what their parents are kind of expecting of them. But I had a pastor friend of ours who was like a grandpa to her. He went into, they were over for dinner, and he went in the room, and I go, I just would like, you to get a feel, so that I don't sit back and think, okay, she's good. She's got her e-ticket to heaven. Well, he went in there, and 45 minutes later, they come back, and he said that she presented the gospel to him, including putting 3 dolls together, Jesus and the 2 criminals on the cross. She turned the light off and said how we're in darkness, and then she turns it back on and talks about how he, shows us the light. And he goes, if I wasn't saved when I went in there, I am now. So,
Oh, that's
just
amazing.
how the Lord works out those things, in that he's still dear to her heart. So it's so precious, because I went through an entire lifetime of abuse, various abuse, from my biological father all the way through my divorce. And her lifetime has been with some of that happening, and still was able to rest in her relationship with the Lord. And so I think that's just so awesome. And I would imagine that a lot of what you guys went through first, even though you would probably love to not have done that, but it grows you. I think it grows you in learning to press into him, and for your dependence on him as you guys moved along, I would imagine.
Yes, and that is a word that, Michele, I love that word, dependence, and I've always felt so dependent. So it's one of those words that I really resonate with it. But so we get to Nashville, and then we have, many years of a whole big life of music for Chuck, all kinds of music making and producing and traveling and touring and making records his own and with other people. And we're continuing to raise our family. And then only about a year after moving to Nashville, so we moved in 89, and in 90, we bought an old country church. We barely had we didn't have the money for it. No, the down payment came through. It's a whole nother story, but we were following just the kind of seeds, the beginning threads of what we understood as having a place where people could gather and have conversations and listen to speakers and authors and musicians, artists, all kinds of people, theologians, speak about the arts and the artful life. And so we bought this place. We didn't really know exactly what was going to happen there, but so we started having gatherings, and people showed up, people from Nashville, people who were passing through. It was we named it the Art House, and lots and lots of people. And that began about 25 years of our life to be immersed in this beautiful, hard, everything mixed up together. And we moved our family in within a few years. And we
Into the art house?
Into the art house.
Oh, okay.
We renovated, we made it into our home. We made a studio for Chuck and all of his work.
Offices,
And you continue to have people coming through like that? It was big enough to have a space for that?
Yeah. So we made a home. We had our offices. We did just everything that we did in this one place for that long. So that was a whole nother chunk of just our life, of really hosting lots and lots and lots and lots of people, whether it was one-on-one, whether it was house guests, whether it was dinners around the table, or people coming for events. We have so much story from all that. And it was, and I learned a lot about who I am through that place. Mm-hmm. And because having been married so young, and then having children so young, and then having a musician husband who was, traveling a lot and gone a lot, I didn't really understand a lot about who I was until we continued to live. And I came to understand that the whole work of hospitality and place and creating a place and creating food and serving people in all those ways, making beautiful gardens, like that was really big part of my work in the world. But I had to understand it that way. And then I learned that I had always been a writer, and I learned to pay attention to that and to follow really my callings in that regard. And so all of that was taking place in this old church called the Art House that became just a really beautiful place, very iconic.
Yeah, I looked it up. I was going to ask you all to talk a little bit about it, and here we are, beautiful segue. And and this was something that you opened up, and it wasn't necessarily a religious situation. It was more of a creative space.
Yeah, I think at the core of it, though, there was a
faith worldview,
the emphasis, an emphasis on Christian discipleship, but through an artistic lens. So it was, diffused, not in accuracy as much as in just more the way artists talk as opposed to religious folk talk.
Well, and I think a lot of times, my writing coach, Bob Goff, and I talk about this. If you do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, we know Bob. Yeah, he's very dear.
Oh, how fun.
Yeah.
And his books don't have scripture throughout them because he always says he's writing for Joe Mechanic. But you don't doubt for a second that he has a relationship with the Lord and that he wants to share with you how awesome that is. And my first book, he and the writing coach he works with, they have split it up, and the first one's going to be a memoir, and the second one's going to lead more into the healing and stuff. But he says that he feels like that about me as well. Is that like I said when we started the podcast, it's not religious, but it's faith-based because that's me and that's my worldview, and I just don't think you can extract that. And a lot of people will say they're like atheist or have no faith worldview, but I have a pastor who used to say, but everybody has a theology, even atheists. This is their theology then. And people who write the songs, it's they're singing their theology and what they believe.
Oh, of course.
And so I think that sometimes that conversation is going to get through to somebody and show them, the foundations and the underpinnings of how Jesus does walk you out of those difficulties and teach you how to have the forgiveness, and teach you how to have the love and understanding. And so many scriptures talk about listening also. So I think it teaches us all of that. Not that I would say don't open the Bible and don't read scripture. I'm just saying that to engage that conversation and be able to just have a true connection with somebody, that's always been to me how it starts best, and especially in a smaller setting, because churches are getting 500, 600, 700, 1,000 in a seating. You're not going to make a bunch of connections in there because everybody's like, okay, I had it in, now I'm on my way out. So I love the idea of your art house.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
now it's been going for over 20 years and it's in multiple locations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the building in Nashville, just as of about a year and a half ago, has been sold. So it's not an art house anymore as a place in Nashville, but although we are still possibly pop-up events, but there's definitely St. Paul, Art House North, and Art House Dallas, St. Paul, Minnesota. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Michele. That is really what we learned in that place, and we took all the way with us to the next season of our life, which is the last 8 years of living in a different place. But it's that the most important thing, the most beautiful thing is that we welcome each other, and we try to be human together and get to know each other and know each other's stories, and that's really priority. And
I think that's ultimately where any healing, any reconciliation, and I don't mean just reconciliation with another human being. I mean just reconciling what we've been through begins with being able to put our story out there. And I have not found a single human being while I'm walking this whole process. I'm starting to put queries out for agents and looking for publishers, my book proposals. And, I was just talking to Bob about this too, is that every single human being along the way has been so impacted by my story already that I told Bob, I go, I almost don't even care if it ever does get published, except for that the Lord has said, no, this is how it works together for good. This has to come out. So he already has my agent. He already has my publisher. I don't know who it is yet. And I'm hoping I don't have to wait too long to get a yes, but whatever.
Yeah.
Well, we wish you well with that.
Oh, thank you so much. I just couldn't be more excited. I mean, and Bob, I thought he was joking. I paid for coaching with him and the woman he works with, Kimberly Stewart. They're fabulous. I thought he was joking when he first told me that he would get on a Zoom with an agent or anybody that was interested. And then my last call with him for this session of coaching was Monday, and he goes, no, I'm your carrot. I'm like, okay. All right. I'm going to put your photo in there. No.
Yeah.
But so I love this book, and I do want to talk about, the story behind it and the components of it. But is this you guys' only book together? Is this your first book together?
It's our first book together. We've both written books on our own, but this is our first together.
Fun. And I mean, I just love it and now to even hear the backstory that you guys had, some rough and tumble at the beginning. Not that I'm happy you had to do that, but I'm just saying a lot of times when we hear people have been married for 50 years, and depending on what decades that went through, a lot of people think people just tough it out because that's what we were taught. Like my grandmother, when my grandfather died, she started saying all this stuff about not really loving him and that she was glad he was out of pain though. And it was just horrible. But it was like their generation was taught divorce isn't an option. not just because of faith. You just didn't do that. You just knuckle it out and crack on. And so to hear that, to see on the bio sheet of the book that it talks about you guys being married for 50 years, but also that your whole story, and then that you're wanting to bring this to light for individuals. I think it's an awesome book, and especially the conversation, and I've had this a lot with people, is like kids who think God doesn't care what college they go to, or people who think that he doesn't care, not that he doesn't care, but that he's not, doesn't have to drill down on where you go work. And so I love like the bullet points that talk a little bit about that. Can you expound on that and why that is where the book kind of centers around?
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. As you were talking, I was thinking that it would be good to, since we talked so much about the art house, it'd be good to also tell the listeners that so much of that life that we had, the 25-year life, running the art house, living there, creating there, hosting there, practicing hospitality there. Many of the stories from that time are in this book.
Awesome.
And in many ways, this book's, in terms of the letters that we write to people, for example, there could be a letter to, people who are longing to love a place and to know how to use it well, right? Well, that plays right into what we've just been talking about, right? We had this place, this amazing place, and we would get up every morning and ask the question, what does it mean to love this place, love the people that come to it? What does it mean to care for it, to make it whimsical and attractive, and a place where people, come to and then tell you, you say, hey, thank you for coming. And they say, are you kidding? I always know something amazing is going to happen here. And we heard that story over and over again. And that just became the ethos for not only our lives, but when it came time to write this book, I think that's what's threaded through this book, is that just the amazing privilege that we had to steward this place, steward people, be cared for ourselves, and then tell that story through these pages in the form of letters. We have to give credit to our, you're talking about your story coach and book coaches, and we have to give credit to our editor to say that it was really her idea to take what would have probably been essays for us, our chapters, and to say, what if you were to write these as letters? And that was such a great coaching, because that really shifted everything at that time, that we were like, oh, okay, yeah. Because for her, it was like, I just want people to feel like they're at the art house, sitting at your kitchen table, and you're walking them through these ideas, or you're telling them these stories. And once she laid that out, then I don't know, that just felt like that was really the direction that things would go.
That sounds awesome. I would love to I can't wait to read it. I think that's exactly like those types of snippets. I haven't seen, now I haven't read every book in the world, but I haven't seen somebody craft it that way. So I think that's really awesome of your editor to catch that and put it in a way that there's so many times with our relationship with Christ, and like there's the church and the overarching, body of Christ. We have these dramatic stories about conversions, or these dramatic stories about lives, when a lot of most of us are like kind of like right here in the middle. We're on the bell curve, and we're like right here in the middle. Yes, we've had trauma. Yes, there may be abuse. Yes, there may be substance abuse, or all the things that we need to walk forgiveness, to receive and to give, and all of that good stuff. But to hear people talking about how just the beauty of you guys' hospitality, you weren't forcing anything down their throat. you were letting them come in and feel safe in a community. And then now their story can have an impact on other people just because of your willingness to serve in this capacity. And I just think I think that's awesome that they chose to have you do it in that format.
Yeah. And I think so. I think too, it was very much in keeping, now as I read through it again, it is in keeping with the way that we lived out the art house life on that property with those people during that time. Without knowing it, I think partially because of our personalities, we don't like being sold to, and so we were never really strong agenda people. And we have some friends who run a retreat center in Texas, and they have this great saying. They say we have an agenda, we just don't have an agenda for you, which I think is great. Well, we were kind of like, we don't even really have an agenda. We don't have one for you, and we don't have one. Because I don't know, I mean, any of your listeners and you personally, we probably all have those experiences where you get in a room with someone or you go to an event and it's so agenda centric, right? It doesn't feel personal. It doesn't feel like you're going to be relational with this person. It's so transactional. And I think what we discovered, and again, this wasn't our clever thinking, but what we discovered was that by not leading with an agenda and just letting things begin with these sort of human moments, right, of interaction, then we would be surprised to see how God would show up in those situations in unique ways that we didn't expect or plan for.
Which might have been stifled had you had some strict agenda. And I don't think
Exactly.
we don't get something out of those conferences and stuff. But
Yeah.
I used to be a women's ministry director, and I joke around about the fact that when you go off and have a retreat, and everybody comes back on fire, and 3 weeks later, do you even remember like what the points were that got you on fire? And so I think when somebody's story and the Lord, it's like is it Michelangelo that does the hand of Adam to hand of God? And it's like if he just took both of you and touched both of you, so that connection to each of your lives is something you won't forget because it touched your touch point too. And I love that kind of thing. I think I'm wired for hospitality too. And my ex-husband and I, we used to do, you can see, I'm a pastry chef. You can see all this stuff.
Yeah.
My podcast studio had a leak in the roof and there's some stuff going on back there.
Yeah, well, this looks great. I loved it. I was going to say, you got some great gear back there.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, this is my 10-quart mixer. And then my ex-husband was an artist. So this is a mural on my wall back here.
Nice.
But anyway, yeah, my house is like wide open, stem to stern. And every year at Christmas, I would gut it and put tables in and have 60 women from just every kind of church, every kind of walk of life for a tea.
Nice.
So, and it was amazing. And it almost was hard not to get to be at every table because those very kind of things will take place if you don't sit there and say, okay, now everybody needs to open up their Bibles, read from this, we're going to do this or that. You know, all of you talk about your Christmas memories. Okay. This was a Christmas tea. Talk about the things that touch your heart. You know, we don't have to, because it's Christmas and that's when Jesus was born, solely talk about the nativity. Let's talk about, you know, the rest of the story about why he came here and let that kind of have its time, you know. So I love that. I think that's awesome. I told you guys when you came in, I don't have an agenda because I want you guys to not feel like you have to only talk about something, you know, and we want to cover your book because, you know, that's how you and I got introduced. But I think people's stories are way more interesting.
Yeah. Yes. And it's been, man, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you.
This was fun.
We're going to have
when
to
does the
wrap.
book come out? March
12th. And
March 12th.
It's available for pre-order right now everywhere books are sold. So
okay.
That's
all right.
That's where we're at. We're doing pre-order.
You're getting that in there. I know I'm
That's right.
to learn all that. I've been on launch teams for people So I understand, when people self-publish or do some other things, what they do, but I'm gonna get to learn firsthand. I just know
That's
it.
right.
I don't know how it's gonna go. I don't know if I get to stay traditional or if I'm gonna have to go to self. But Bob has geared me up and he's like, well, it's gonna happen one way or the other, Michelle. He goes, if you go traditional, it might be a year. He goes, if you go self, it could be Wednesday. I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, you're in such good hands with Bob.
Tell Bob that you met us.
We love him to
When you
death.
talk to
We
him
love
next
him to death. Yeah.
He's such a great guy.
Yeah.
And we're both sevens. I don't know if you're Enneagram people, but we're both sevens. And so a conversation for a half hour with the two of us is,
Yeah.
chaos.
All right. We're
Well,
gonna have to roll.
It was such a pleasure to meet you both. And I will go ahead and do my outro. I want to thank you all for coming to class. If you would like to connect or get their book, all of those links will be in the show notes. But I think this book is going to be incredible for each of you. So go on where books are sold, and the link and the title and everything will be in the show notes. And I just want to thank you for coming to class, and class dismissed.